He said,
Yes. So, good morning once again to us all. I'm very much grateful and honored to have each and every one of you here. Um, I promise you an interesting section ahead, and as already introduced by our last introductory call, my name is Prince Otri, a part of the Prof's Accountancy Solutions lectures, group of lectures. I'm going to take you for tax audit and investigations, and it's going to be an enjoyable section. Feel free to always come in with questions. I like people who are always like trying to ask questions to clarify matters, to understand. It normally helps the class. Okay, let's not make it a lecture. Everyone keeps quiet. We all go. Let's ensure that we also contribute to the class. Let's make the class very interactive. Then also, I'm just setting some basic ground rules here. I have two main objectives for you coming on board, right? My first objective is for you to pass your exam. That's my number one objective, which we are all going to do. Then number two, to add to knowledge. Okay, so you're not just learning this for the sake of exam, even though my priority is for you to pass your exam. You are also expected to what? Add to knowledge, because this is a professional course, and afterwards you are expected to possess some kind of skills. You don't just learn and pass your exam and afterwards you're unable to prove you are a member of the CITG. No. Okay. All right. At this point, are there any questions so that we quickly start? Any comments? I do not want us to do an individual introduction of ourselves. So maybe before you speak, you can just mention maybe your name, where you work, then you can just continue to speak. Maybe you want to ask a question, make a contribution, or cite an example you've experienced before, or whatever the case would be. Okay. All right. So I believe for myself, I've already done the introduction. For those of you who joined the introductory class, I currently work for PwC. I've been doing this for a very long time, very long time. So we hope we all have an enjoyable section. Okay, now we are going to go through what the syllabus expects us to know for tax audit. Okay, the syllabus starts by telling us about the framework of audit. So we are supposed to know about the framework of tax audit. We are going to learn about concept of accountability, independence, professional and ethical guidelines to audit. And with professional and ethical guidelines to audit, you know, as professionals, we are covered by some professional and ethical principles. So you cannot work or carry out your professional mandate outside the scope of those principles. So that is something key that we must all know. So we are going to learn about that. Then duties and responsibilities of auditors. We are going to talk about audit planning for your tax audit, planning for audits also in general. So let me just make this statement or issue this caveat. The structure of tax audits, right, is more or less like financial audit tailored to tax audits. So you realize that as we move along, we are going to look at certain things that might not entirely relate to tax audits, but they are financial audit concepts that as tax auditors, we need to know, because as tax auditors, you'll be dealing with the financial statements of companies a lot of the times. So we need to also understand how the normal audit is done. And tax audits encompasses some principles that are normal audit principles that are used to carry out our tax audit mandate. So at some point, you realize that you'll be doing stuff that are purely financial audit stuff, but then those skills are helpful for our tax audit. And because as tax auditors, we are going to employ the usage of the financial statement most of the time, we are going to actually need that and need those skills, right? Kindly ensure all your mics, all your voices are muted, please. So Justice, kindly mute your mic for us because it distorts the class.
Apply for.
Emmanuel, Justice, kindly mute your mic for us.
You need approval.
Okay, all right. Moving on. So we are going to look at audit planning, whatever it takes to do an audit plan. Then we are going to look at audit practices and procedures. Audit practices and procedures. So with audit practices and procedures, we are going to look at a lot of audit concepts and audit practices, okay? Then we will delve into some form of investigations at all. Then you'll be looking at audit reporting and review. So audit is made up of 3 basic processes. So you start from planning, you execute the tax audit, then you conclude. That's where you do your reporting and all that. And whatever comes after the reporting, we're also going to have discussions around that, like around tax appeals and objections. I'm so grateful the tax appeals board had been finally put to work, and they are looking at cases and all that. We are also going to have discussions around them. Okay. Then the syllabus does not really touch some areas that I feel is supposed to touch. Sometimes you go to the exam hall, you might be faced with surprises. You might not know where these things are coming from. So we've put together some areas also that we would want our students to also know, right? We would want our students to also know to help them in catching up with areas that they might seem as gray areas that the examiner might be touching on, okay? So computation of capital allowance, CIT computations, overview of customs and excise, VAT, overview of the Revenue Administration Act, which I normally expect students to have the law in addition to other laws, but that particular law is Act 915. It's not really bulky, very simple, and it administers almost every aspect of our tax system. So it will be a good thing for us to have. And as a tax professional, you need to have all the laws. If not all, most of the laws. So the 915, the 896, the 870, which is the VAT Act. These are the 3 basic ones. If you do not have any acts at all, at least you can have these ones, and you can easily get them from Assembly Press. Okay, so tax development, free zones audit, post-clearance audit, bank reconciliation, due diligence audits, and some other key topics. Okay, so we will even be looking at some point strictly compliance, how taxpayers are supposed to comply with the tax laws, most of the issues that are normally found during tax audits, how they are supposed to be resolved and tackled and all that. Okay, at this point, are there any questions so that we can just move straight away to what we would have for the rest of the day? Are there any questions? No questions. Okay. At this point, I just need few people. Specifically tailor your expectations. What are your expectations for our section ahead? And in the coming few weeks, what are your expectations for this run-through course? Just few people, and it's fine. Just your expectation, so that I'm able to tailor the classes to meet expectations. Yeah, so who is giving it a fair shot? Okay, so since no one is speaking,
hello, I'm Sylvester.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Sylvester.
Sylvester.
Yeah, so my expectation is that at the end of the program, I should be able to understand the processes, procedures, all that entails with tax audit, and gain some relevant knowledge and skill, so that I can also practice that if I get opportunity to. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, sir. My name is George Henry Hexon, works with Jasmine Group of Company. My expectations is I'll be able to get the basic understanding of the whole tax audit processes. I'll also be able to acquire knowledge and use it in my daily day-to-day activities.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so we can move on. God,
hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Joseph Jima. I work with EFRA. So
Okay.
my aspiration objective aligns with yours, what you just mentioned. That first of all, I'll be able to pass these exams and then add to knowledge, so that at least as a tax practitioner, I'll be able to deliver on whatever responsibility I'm given in the future. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Joe. So we can basically move on from here. So today we are going to look at the framework of tax audit and investigation. We are going to look at the audit process. We are going to look at the ethical and legal framework of tax audits, tax investigations. We are going to look at some past questions, just to see for an outline for today's class. Yes. So let me start. Tax audit is relevant, and it has always been relevant because of our ongoing attempt by companies to always hide revenue, underpay tax, evade taxes, avoid taxes, and all that. So nowadays there are complex company structures sprouting out, companies structuring themselves in such a way that they are going to have some tax benefits. Okay, tax avoidance is always good. Okay, tax evasion is not the best. It's not good. It's illegal. But then there are times where you see a lot of these companies trying to avoid tax, in a process evading taxes. And this is why tax audit is very, very important. With a lot of multinational corporations sprouting out, we need to ensure that the correct and right amount of taxes is paid to the state. And as we all know, tax audits or tax revenue, it's one of the main revenue streams of government and helps government business. And government has an eye on it, and based on that, tax audit is very relevant to ensure that every company in the country pays, and every individual in the country pays the right amount of taxes that is due the state. So basically, that brings on tax audits. And ideally, tax audit is supposed to be carried out for every company, every year. But you would agree with me that looking at the Ghana Revenue Authority, the resources in terms of personnel would not be much to be able to carry out audit on every company every year. So that is why in audit we call something risk assessment. You need to do a risk assessment and know your risky taxpayers and focus on them, because those are the ones that are going to rake in more revenue for the state. During tax audits, there are some objectives that we have in mind, okay? So primarily, we want to make sure that the tax program is executed in an equitable manner. So Once everyone is paying what is due the state, it means that there's some form of equity. There is no bias. Okay. But truth be told, sometimes there might not be that form of equity when it comes to the practicality of tax audits. Imagining conducting a tax audit on your father's company, you might not really be fair. But as professionals, the tax audit program is supposed to be a fair program. And that in times of instances where we are threatened not to be fair, that's where ethics comes in. We need to employ some form of safeguard to be able to ensure that we are ethically right in performing our tax. In other words, ensuring that we are fair to everyone. Also, it ensures proper reporting of taxpayers' audits. Once you do a tax audit, it helps taxpayers know the amount of taxes they are due. It gives them an idea of the kind of taxes or tax exposure they are exposed to, and it influences their reporting. Okay, they do the right thing subsequently, because once you are able to correct them on areas that they are not compliant, subsequently they are likely to do the right thing. Okay, it's also a form of education. As we all know, one basic point of performing a tax audit is to educate taxpayers. Some taxpayers may not have tax consultants like us on this call to be able to educate them on some relevant aspects of the tax law. But then they just come out doing things like the way they want it, and in that event, flouting the tax laws. In the process of doing tax audit, we are able to draw their mind, question their mind on things that the law expects them to do, and we educate them. So most people see tax audit as a policing event. No, tax audit is not supposed to be a policing event. Tax audit is expected to be a friendly event where taxpayers are educated on areas they do not know about, new tax development, so that going forward, they are going to correct their mistakes from that side. It's also a form of voluntary compliance. Once you are being audited, now the onus is on you to voluntarily comply, because you would not like GRA to come again and say you are not compliant, and as a result, we are still applying some form of penalties and charges. And you know, penalties and interest charged as a result of tax audit are quite punitive. Okay. Because, for example, you are charged an interest of 125% compounded monthly using the monetary policy rate on any tax liability that you owe to GRA. If the tax liability stays for, let's say, 2 or 3 years, the more you pay, and it's very punitive. And companies will not want to find themselves in that particular instance. So they always want to ensure that they are complying voluntarily. And the maximum revenue they can generate for the state, as I said earlier, tax audit is for revenue generation for the state. Now, let me just pick up our minds on the concept of investigation. So tax audits and investigations have two broad areas. Now I've talked about the tax audit aspect. Let's look at the investigation aspect. So as GRA, as customs, BTRD, and the other support services, which are the main sections under GRA, they have respective roles that they play. Aside the normal audit teams, there are also special investigators who do investigations on special cases. Some may or even include the tax auditors, some may include compliance officers and all that. Now, the concept of tax investigation is just to trigger our minds on the fact that there are certain instances that could happen in a taxpayer's business that would need an investigation. And when these things happen, they trigger it is foreseen that those instances are going to lead to a tax non-compliance, leading to a tax evasion, and there might be a likelihood of there going to be a court case, or it's going to trigger a court case, because whatever the taxpayer did that needed or warranted that investigation, it's something serious, and it's something that is going to affect the state. in terms of loss of tax revenue. So normally tax investigations are instances where admissible evidences are gathered to recover undercharged taxes in instances where there are tax avoidance, evasion, non-compliance, to enforce the criminal aspect of the law. So if some penalties or some interest are supposed to be charged on these instances for or some form of imprisonment or whatever penal rules there are, they need to apply in these investigations. So just to pick up your mind on a few instances that could trigger a tax investigation. So when a taxpayer keeps two sets of accounts, I had the opportunity to work for GRA for over a year, and during my time working with GRA, we were not really staff of GRA, but then we were consultants working with staff of GRA for like over a year. And our main focus was to audit most of the LTOs. If I say LTOs, the large taxpayers. So we were auditing like companies like MTN, Guinness Ghana, Unilever, the big mining companies, the banks and all that. So that was the target for like those assignments. Now, as part of those assignments, there were other bigger companies people would not really realize, like some of them were owned by the Lebanese, the Indians and all that. Now, just to give you a quick thought on some of the key takeaways from those audits, there were taxpayers that I encountered keeping two sets of bank accounts. So they had the normal bank accounts that are reflected on their financial statements. They also had other bank accounts that is being used but does not reflect in their bank account. Sorry, their financial statement. How did I find out? So in one of the times in my interactions with the head of finance and in their finance room, so it's like an open office space, there was a check issued to one of their suppliers, and the check was a GT Bank check. But from the company's financial statements, normally on the financial statement, you might not see the account, but on the corporate information page, I think on page number 2, which talks about the company's registered office, their auditors, their bankers, I didn't see any GT Bank there. So I alerted the right quarters on this information, and an investigation was conducted later, specifically on that. Okay. There are other instances where companies could do a lot of things. They have financial statement that they give to GRA. They have financial statement that they give to maybe to new investors that wants to invest in their business. They have financial statement that they give out to regulators and all that. People do a whole lot of things. So these are things that could trigger an investigation. So I have a number of things here that are instances that trigger investigation. So let's move on. Just to conclude on tax audit and tax investigations, there are some few differences, okay? They are not the same. So tax audit is a legal mandate, like it's a legal obligation to conduct tax audits on companies after the year end. But for tax investigations, these are not mandated legally. They are triggered by instances, okay? So that is why tax audit is planned. You plan for tax audits, but tax investigations are not planned. Okay, they are not planned because they are orchestrated by triggers. So once there are triggers, you just zoom in to investigate. And also, normally tax audits are carried on previous financial statements where we have audited financial statements. After the financial audits are done, someone is not muted. Kindly do so for us, please. So Tax audit is normally carried out on already audited financial statements, but tax investigation, sometimes they might want to go deeper into areas that, because they just want to uncover and get some form of evidence. So they go as long as they can. Okay. So basically, these are the main differences between tax audit and tax investigation. So they are not the same. They are not the same. Now, let's get back to tax audits. So they are participants of tax audits. In performing tax audits, there are two main participants. Okay, the taxpayer and the states, which is represented by the Ghana Revenue Authority. Now, taxpayers are given the right to be able to have representation. So let's get this right. In doing a tax audit, even though the two main players or the key players are the taxpayer and the Ghana Revenue Authority, the taxpayer can have a representative who will represent the company in all affairs of the tax audit. So that can be a consultant. So consultants like us, consultants like companies who are at like tax, who have tax departments that can assist these companies during tax audits. Ghana Revenue Authority can also use consultants. So Ghana Revenue Authority can say, okay, this firm does well when it comes to tax audits. They have a track record. We are currently hard pressed with staff and we want some key audits conducted. Ghana Revenue Authority can say, okay, they are contracting AB and Co Limited to do a tax audit on Ghana Revenue's behalf. So that instance, Ghana Revenue also has a representative. Okay. Now, let's look at the rights of a taxpayer. Taxpayers have numerous rights, and as a taxpayer, you need to ensure that these rights are respected. So you have a right to understanding the audit process. That is why GRA sends out planning letters to taxpayers before an audit starts. And these letters sent out to taxpayers tells them how the tax audit is going to be conducted, when the areas who are going to be involved and all that, so that they can agree on timelines. The taxpayer has the responsibility to understand the process. You don't just surprise the taxpayer, pass into their offices and say, I want to conduct a tax audit. No. Privacy and confidentiality. Oh, you are doing a tax audit on MTN. Airtel Tigo is also a company that GRA does tax audit on. You don't have to leak information of Airtel Tigo to MTN or vice versa, because they might have some peculiar strategies that they are using as key players in the market. So as a tax auditor, you need to ensure confidentiality. The taxpayer has that right to confidentiality and privacy. Professional and courteous service, we need to be nice in our approach. You don't have to be fighting with them and all that. Representation, as I explained, the taxpayer has a right to be represented, and also to pay the correct amount of taxes, and also the right to appeals and judicial reviews when they feel they are not being treated fairly. Okay, now let's look at the audit team. So a typical tax audit team is going to be staff of GRA, okay? So GRA, in the hierarchy of GRA, you have the Commissioner General, you have the head of audit in terms of the tax line of things. Note, the Commissioner General is responsible for every other thing that goes on in GRA. So he's responsible for everything. So when it comes to tax audits, we see him as having the utmost responsibility, because all tax auditors represent the Commissioner General. Now, you have the head of audit as well. We have audit supervisors. We have the team lead on audit assignments, and we have the normal audit team members. Okay. Now, the head of audit has some key responsibilities that it is supposed to perform. So let's look at the key responsibilities from the head of audit down to the normal audit team members. Now, the head of audit, because he's the head of audit, he has some strategic kind of roles to perform. For example, he is going to find himself in management meetings, and he's supposed to communicate downwards some of the decisions that affect the audit unit. So, for example, when COVID came, I'm sure management of GNI would have a meeting, all the heads will meet, and they'll have a discussion as to how things should go. Most especially, tax audit is normally conducted in the taxpayer's office, and based on that, they would have to revise their strategy. So GNI will now be doing more of a DEX audits. So maybe they can say from 2020 to 2022, for the next 2 years, let's roll out more of tax audits rather than rolling out on visiting taxpayers' office to do tax audit as we used to do. So now what do we need? We need some tools and softwares to help us work remotely from the office. So all this communication will be heard by the head of audit, but he would come down to the various audit team to disseminate that information because he is having that kind of management position. Now, he also identified the resource needs of taxpayers and is also able to what? Provide the needed resources for their team in terms of team capacity, in terms of resources, laptops, and all that. The head of audit sees to all those things. He is also responsible for reviewing the audit reports, okay? But then before he reviews the audit reports, the team lead would have done the audit reports reviewed by the supervisor before it gets to him. Also, he is also responsible for giving his thoughts and helping the team resolve areas of that involve key professional judgment or areas of high contention. The head of audit is responsible for helping the team actually resolve issues that are above them. Okay, so normally when the issue is above the team, they consult their team lead. If the team lead is unable to respond, they consult the audit supervisor. Then if he's also unable to handle, it comes down to the head of audit, where issues at that level must be responded to. Okay, so he is also responsible for drawing the annual audit plan and seeing to its implementation. He also help in allocating of resources. He also does trainings and all that. So basically, these are the main responsibilities of a head of audit. Then audit supervisors, they are not really on field doing the tax audits. At every point in time, the supervisors will have about 2 or 3 tax audits they are working on. Okay, kindly ensure your mics are muted, please. The supervisors will ensure that we have about 2 or 3 audits that they are handling. So maybe once a week, they visit a particular team and ensure that things are going on well. So they also do some form of upward communication to the head of audit, because based on what he finds, he's able to resolve issues. Whatever issues he can't resolve, he escalates it upwards. If he finds that maybe the team needs something, he needs to also escalate upwards. He does some review of the work of the team, help them in putting together their reports, reviewing their reports and all that. He also does some form of trainings for the team. He is also responsible for helping assign jobs, assigning responsibilities, and ensuring that the timelines and deadlines for the teams are met. Okay, now moving down from the audit supervisor, I move to the team lead. So the team lead, basically, he's always on field leading all the tax audit work. So he is responsible for doing peer reviews, responsible for liaising with the client on issues, responsible for communicating issues that he is not able to handle to the supervisor. He is also responsible for training the audit associates or the other audit team members on areas that they do not understand. He carries out audit procedures and does some form of the work as well. The other team members are responsible for carrying out the audit procedures, gathering evidence. So they gather audit evidence as to areas of CIT, withholding taxes, including PAYE, areas of VAT and all that. They carry out the procedures to gather the evidence on tax audits. Okay, so they are doing the granular details of whatever work that they are expected to do as tax audits. Okay, all right. So basically, these are the responsibilities of the audit team, right? The call is ending soon. I entreat us to kindly join as soon as the call ends. Okay, this is meant to help us in terms of our recording purposes to have short videos to be able to upload. Okay, All right. So we'll be moving on to tax record keeping obligations as soon as we get back. So we will be looking at how taxpayers are supposed to keep proper records as enshrined in the various laws we have.